Most kids who have that naturalistic sense or intelligence, the ones who play with the rocks, the ones who bring leaves home, they're the ones who will connect with wildlife.
And you guys run 365 days of the year.
Yes.
And you do rescues at night.
What am I doing? Who am I answerable to? For me, I am answerable to the animals. Every
Same.
animal that comes to my organization.
Yeah.
I am answerable to the donor who put faith in me.
I walked into the Delhi Zoo office and I said, I want to help.
Right.
And I was just told to get out.
If you are in an emergency field, now you tell me, do you know of human hospitals that shut down on Sundays? No.
I believe catch poles are for wildlife primarily and not for flinging dogs into vehicles.
Have a picture with a tiger?
As a kid, I had 2 terrapins. I bought it from a pet shop.
You know what we view as welfare, like you said, are people looking at exactly what's happening?
Somebody's grandfather or grandfather was a shikari.
You should be asking these questions to any organization you donate to, whether it's human, whether it's animal.
Correct.
If you are giving, make sure that beyond compassion, you're also solving a problem.
Yes.
Most people don't even know
what is around.
Yeah, what is around.
When you hire your animal handlers, do you ask them if they like animals?
I get where you're coming from because again, I dealt with it for so many years. I feel that if there were minimum care guidelines, a lot of this would get ironed out.
Welcome to Four Legs, Two Mics. I'm Shivani Mathur. Today on the podcast, we're going to be speaking with someone I've been very excited to meet for a while. She is a wildlife rescue specialist. She runs a wildlife NGO called Rescue CT. Her name is Neha Panjamia. I have been so inspired watching the work they've all been doing. But let's get into the conversation and let her let you know all about it. I don't really have these fangirl moments, but when I see the work you guys do, how you do it, your tech, I'm an events person, so the timing of how you do your rescues, and I'm going to get into that later, it's just mind-blowing. For me, it's like you guys are running a Wakanda for animals in India. How did you get into this and what all goes into this?
Ever since I was a kid, I've been one of those that the suffering of any animal would really bother me. Yeah. And, you grow up thinking, you sometimes take any animal to a doctor or anything like that. But I think it reached a point where I wanted to do something concrete about it because there weren't enough emergency services available. And it's very easy to complain and say, oh, no one's doing it. There should, the government should be doing this or other organizations should be doing it. I think you reach a point where you stop pointing fingers and then you say, I just have to do this myself. And so that's how Rescue began. It did not begin like this. So it began really small. Yeah. Just a few people. There's been it's been years of learning, making mistakes, learning from them, getting better, aspiring to do more. And I think still there's a long way to go. But yeah, that's how it began. It began from a very simple emotion where it was about easing animal suffering. And it's grown from that. Of course, what we do, why we do what we do today has evolved. Yeah. But in a sense, that's where the organization began from.
Yeah, because I love your tagline. It's helping animals, people, and the place we call home.
True.
And it really resonates. It's humble, it's to the ground, but what you do, you're really understating the stuff. For me, you guys help over 200 plus different species of animals, right?
Right.
Could you name a few?
Well, the list is more than 230 species now, but let me name a bunch of the interesting ones, So, of course, leopard, which is one of my favorites, the Indian eagle owl, the pangolin. So it's basically birds, mammals, and reptiles that we work with. And leopards, tigers, elephants, these are the common ones that people would know. In the more sort of ones that people don't commonly come across, the pangolins, the mouse deers, the four-horned antelopes, the samba deers, and then there's the giant squirrel.
Oh, wow.
And there's just so many. I would have to.
And you guys handle crocs and stuff as well,
yes,
right?
Crocodiles as well, very commonly.
When we were growing up, it was the zoo films. Mm-hmm. So I think the first wildlife film was Born Free and Living Free
Yes.
with Elsa. One that really upset me, which was called Gorillas in the Mist.
Yes.
Right? The
Yeah.
Diane Fossey one, where was my first introduction to
yes.
poachers. Then you see these animals in captivity
Yeah.
in a zoo.
Zoo.
And it's very normalized, right?
Right.
अगर जानवर देखना है तो zoo जाओ. Right? We grew up. I'm talking about the years I grew up.
Correct. So you see, zoos have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
There's initially and many years ago, especially when we didn't have access to today, whether it's social media or other means of learning
Yeah.
or exposure, zoos were initially considered to be like an education tool or an exposure tool.
Correct.
Right? But it's also about is that valid in today's times?
Yeah.
Also, certain rules that we have, which what makes one question the entire concept in itself.
Yeah.
So, as an educational tool, as a resource, that's what it was originally touted to be.
Okay.
But how it is regulated, how it is used today is questionable at times, especially in our country.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to talk about is that, we came from families that somebody's grandfather or grandfather was a shikari,
Correct.
right? And in my own home, there used to be an elephant foot planter. And when I would ask,
Yeah.
I touched the skin and it was rough like an elephant. And then I'm watching Jungle Book with Colonel Hathi and
Yes.
Dumbo, and then I'm seeing the zoo. And, it's so confusing for a child that why do you have this at home? And it was accepted. It was very normal to have taxidermy tigers around,
Correct.
have animal heads on the wall.
So
And it
you
was really
see-
upsetting.
So I'll tell you, you have, of course, from where you come, you look at it and it is upsetting. But let's put it into perspective
Yes.
of this whole sector, this whole field of wildlife rescue, rehabilitation, wildlife protection to begin with.
Yes.
It was only in 1972. And if you look at it, that's not very long ago also.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was only in 1972 when it went from everything being game reserves and hunting in India,
Yeah.
which was normal, legal,
Yeah.
until 72, where then wildlife became protected. And then we're talking national parks, then we're talking sanctuaries, right? So, everyone, there is, you look at Jim Corbett,
Yeah.
he was a hunter.
Exactly.
And then you talk about today, the national park is named after him.
Yeah.
And not all hunting is bad. Not all hunting is, whether it's bad or good, in what scenario, situation it is done. What constitutes the term hunting?
Yeah.
The reality is the capture of an animal, even in our law today, is termed as hunting. But technically it's capture.
It's capture.
Right? So we also have this perception about hunting that all hunting, because the word is hunting,
Hunting is
is
bad.
done out of that. But one has to look in what context it was done, whether it
Yeah.
was just a capture because it necessitated capture, or was it done for pleasure.
Yeah.
Right? So prior to 1972, till the Wildlife Protection Act came
Yeah.
in, it was all about hunting. So
Yeah.
animals in India have gained that protection status only after that. And even then, just last year in 2023, our Wildlife Protection Act, there was an amendment. And in fact, a lot more species are protected now.
Okay.
But like you said, it's confusing for a child.
Yeah.
I think this is the same with other things that were, okay before.
Yes.
And now there is this, a more conscious generation. We question the clothes we are wearing,
Yes.
whether they are made ethically,
Yes.
or is this, or where it's been sourced from. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of falls in
evolving.
those categories where you be conscious about everything
Yeah.
you do, whether it's an item that is a decorative piece, or whether it's the clothes you're wearing.
Yeah.
So I think it's about being conscious, and I think the next generation itself is questioning all their choices, whether it's food, whether it's what they indulge in,
Yeah.
whether it's pets,
Yeah.
those kind of
Everything,
things.
yeah.
So if you have
Go to
any
forest.
wildlife product,
Yeah.
any artifact, anything, please go to your local forest department and say, this has been passed on by generations.
Yeah.
I would now like to give it to you, and they will take it in and destroy it.
Yeah, it blows my mind to see how your teams, like I think there was a leopard rescue in a densely populated area, and your teams were in and out within 45 minutes, and you guys come in like these, I know, superheroes with like your vehicles, your drones go up, your perimeter is like set, you have secured the animal. Now, because of events and timings and crowd control, I was very keen to understand how you guys do conflict management, work in tandem with your forest department, the cops that are there, and everything. And I mean, how have you pulled this off? How do you do it?
So this, what you're seeing right now has taken years of working
Yes.
together, number one. Also, a lot of people may have heard, I think it happened during COVID, where a gore entered Pune. And interestingly, we were not in the city. I myself was not in the city at that time. I still remember it happened on 9th December. At that time in Solapur, there was a problem leopard which was moving, 7 kilometers in one direction every single day. And there were 14 deaths, which, definitely it was that leopard. So we were all after that before anyone else got affected. And at the same time, this gore came in, and it was a situation that was not well managed. We didn't have sufficient teams. In fact, the core team was in Solapur at that time. And the gore died, and it was absolute chaos. I think I would say it died because of stress, because it was a situation that got badly managed. Too many people, too much chaos, chased it down, exhausted it. It died of cardiac myopathy eventually.
Oh my God.
That was a wake-up call. It upset me so much.
Yeah.
I mean, so in about 10 days from then, I remember on 20th or 21st December, we held a program. And I think this is the best part about being an NGO, that you remain neutral.
Yes.
And so we put together an event with the forest department, with the police department present, all the key stakeholders in managing human-wildlife conflict, right? To come together in one place and talk about their roles and outlining as a stakeholder, what is your key role? So, for example, the police's main role is to do crowd control, especially in an urban area. The rescue team's job, once the perimeter is sort of secured, is to only focus on the animal capture, right? And then the forest department, along with the police, so forest department is the one then coordinating with all the entities as well. And then, for example, like in Pune, of course, we do have veterinarians, but in other cities where you don't, then you have to, the department also has to coordinate with the animal husbandry department. So there are multiple departments, and then the media also has to get managed, because, this live relay of conflict when you're trying to resolve it actually causes problems, because people are watching it and then they come onto the streets, which becomes dangerous for them. Right? So essentially in such scenarios, you have to make sure that everyone is sort of coordinated together. So especially now in areas where wildlife straying into urban areas, I think it's like a quite a well-oiled system now, where everyone knows what their roles are. And I think that's the case with everything, right? If everyone knows the role they have to play, then you streamline it. Also, one of the things we do is after every rescue, no matter how good, or even if something's gone wrong, we always do a review and say, what could have made this better? What if we had certain equipment, would it really help? And with that, slowly over time, we've realized that, okay, this would increase the efficiency, this would make it safer. And then we've tried to, put that out. And then we've had incredible donors over the years who've donated us this equipment one by one. And that's what's made us really efficient. So we go out there and do the work, but it's the support of, our supporters, donors, all the other departments, even the governmental departments, who are now willing to even recognize that NGOs have certain expertise and are filling in the gaps that maybe we are not able to. And as an NGO, we realize the limitations we have, where the governmental departments have the strongest role to play in it. So I think playing to your strengths is something we've realized. I think we figured out that equation of, with the departments, that we are only here to do this.
Because you seem to have cracked it, and I don't see, are other people doing this? Because it doesn't seem like it.
There's very few organizations that are focusing on wildlife rescue and rehabilitation. You could say there are organizations that focus on a particular species,
Yeah.
or there are NGOs that are working on habitat protection. So
Yeah.
in the sector, definitely there are several NGOs working on different sectors.
Yeah.
Several are very research focused, but I think there are very few, I can count them on just to,
Yeah.
on my hand. But who are focusing on wildlife rescue and rehabilitation where it is not, where it's species no bar. For us, whether it's a leopard or an elephant, or whether it's, a common myna,
Yeah.
will still respond the same
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
And you guys run 365 days of the year.
Yes.
And you do rescues at night.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing how you do that because, as you know, I'm working with NGOs and I speak to people across. And what I find is most of them don't work on weekends. There are barely any night rescues. And it's not like the animals are going to time their injuries according to your schedule. I mean,
Correct.
as blatantly as I can say it. So, how does one get
See, I'll
there?
tell you, I think it's about, I think we're talking about a couple of things here.
Yes.
Number one, to broadly say that, if you are in an emergency field, now you tell me, do you know of human hospitals that shut down on Sundays? No.
Exactly.
Right? So I think it's, when we say NGO, we should not assume that all animal organizations are rescue organizations or emergency NGOs.
Yeah.
So for example, if it's a shelter and they decide to keep closed on one day, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes.
Right? But if you are an emergency service, then no, you possibly can, especially when you're dealing with trauma,
Yeah.
you possibly can't be closed.
Yeah.
So we do operate 365 days a year. Besides, at our rescue center, at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, we have animals all year round.
Exactly.
So there is no break in that sense. But having said that, one of the reasons why people keep a day off or need to take off in the night is because it's very emotionally stressful.
Yes.
But what I can say is, in an organization like ours, at least we have enough staff full time so that to accommodate for that.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's still a very emotionally stressful, physically stressful, mentally stressful job. A lot of people, of course, who do the work do it because they love
Yes.
what they do here.
Yeah.
But there are days where we have to tell them, do not come to work. Or
Which is
just,
because
can
you
not,
need to.
Yeah, you need to decompress.
That's another thing I find really unique about your organization. I feel they're all leaders. Like you've managed to find, or these people have gravitated towards you and joined you, right?
I
It's a combination of it
I
all.
think it's a combination of a lot of things. I kid you not, I was not like this 10 years ago.
I'm sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I was, I think shades of that are still there, where I am about, ensuring something is perfectly done.
Yeah.
It was very hard for me to delegate things to others.
Yeah.
But over the years, I've realized if for myself and for the organization, this needs to happen. I also think several times, especially, there's something called the founder syndrome. Okay, I learned about this when I was doing a sort of continuous education course with Harvard, and they spoke about the founder syndrome, and that's when it hit me when I would look at even NGOs around me, where it started off with one person's vision,
Yes.
and with time, either that vision got diluted,
Yeah.
or the person's not there anymore, and then the organization's gone awry.
Yeah.
Or the organization grew so much and there was only one person controlling it,
It just got
right? That it just
stifled.
got fragmented,
Yeah.
and the vision didn't translate.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something that I've really tried to consciously work on.
Yeah.
Where, for the lack of a better word, I was like, if I die tomorrow, I don't want all my work to go to vain.
Exactly.
Or who am I passing this organization to?
Yeah.
Do I want this just to be alive as long as I live?
Yeah.
The reality is, a lot of people don't think about,
Yes.
a succession plan.
Yes.
And that is something I started thinking in my late 30s. I mean, I had a bit of an advantage because I started the organization when I was 23.
Yeah.
So I got to make all my mistakes really early and learn from it.
Yeah.
And want to, stabilize it. So
Yeah.
I've realized, you can lead an organization, but you have to find the leaders within the organization as well.
Yes.
And then empower them enough, even if it means you have to sit back at times. So there are a lot of things I would love to do, but sometimes I have to hold myself
Yeah.
back as well, because if I stuck my head into everything, I wouldn't allow them to grow.
Yes.
And I think that's really important. So especially for the core team. So there are things they are pretty much doing on their own now. Of course, there's systems where everyone reports.
Yeah.
But yes, they have a free hand to operate. So I always say the organization may have been started by me.
But it's running with them.
Yeah, it's run by all of us, number
Yeah.
one. And number two, I also feel that the direction in which we go will be determined by everybody, not just because of me, even
Yeah.
going forward. So I think this has been a conscious change in the last 5 to 6 years for sure.
That's amazing.
But yeah, that's the plan, because I'm not going to be around forever, and I may as well think about it now. Why wait for D-Day?
Welfare is now really, at least in the domestic animal space, focused on just veterinary. The welfare part is just forgotten. How you collect an animal, how you keep an animal, how you feed an animal is not as important as I think. I mean, this is my personal experience. It's just like we've done the surgery now, we've helped the dog now, ho gaya. And then you can see this petrified animal being manhandled, dirty kennel, stinky kids screaming, suffering. You can see all of that, and you're like, but this is a welfare. I feel veterinary, of course, is a big part
of it, yes.
It is a part of it. Right.
So what you're essentially saying right now, you tell me, and it's very interesting. One should always try to draw these correlations to humans as well.
Yes.
So for example, you could have the best surgeon in the world,
Yeah.
but if you're admitted in the hospital and the veterinary nurse treats you really badly, you're going to scream and shout about it, right? And it's going to be really bad.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when we talk about health of an animal, generally people associate the word health
With
only with medical.
And it's
Now, I mean, of course, there's been so much awareness about mental health, because health is not just physical health.
Yes.
It's, how the animal is feeling mentally,
Yes.
emotionally, its stress levels. So, for example, when an animal comes into the rescue center, a wildlife, so you can imagine it's a little bird who's broken its leg. Now, it's already it's a wild animal, never probably been captured in its life.
Yeah.
So, firstly, a human has captured it and it's not used to that. So it's already in stress. Obviously, it's broken its leg, so it's under double stress.
Yeah.
To top it, now we are going to put it into an enclosure which it has never been in, right?
Exactly.
So, but again, it's one of those situations where you have to put that animal into cage rest or it will not recover, right? So, of course, the veterinarian will do his treatment.
Yeah.
That's why I always say that for every animal, you need a wildlife veterinarian, you need a wildlife rehabilitator.
Yeah.
What is the role of a rehabilitator? It is to mitigate its captivity stress. So in that enclosure, if I'm going to put natural vegetation around, if I know that this animal likes to hide, for example, in tree barks, we will make sure we put that in.
Nice.
So while the stress is there, you have to find ways to mitigate that stress as well. So to reduce its stress, again, the veterinarian will think from the perspective that this animal has to go back as fast as possible. So he has a choice to do a really complicated surgery which may take 3 months to heal, or do another procedure where the animal will possibly recover back in 15 days.
Yeah.
We'll choose the 15-day option, because the most important goal is to send it back as fast as possible.
Yeah.
So you see, when we're looking at health in general, one has to not only look at what you can do medically,
Exactly.
but what is the stress level that it will put the animal through, how are we handling the animals.
Yes.
Simple thing like a wild animal will get stressed every time you approach it, right? So we make sure that our rehabilitators are feeding, cleaning, giving whatever oral medication they need to, all at one shot, so that animal is bothered only one time in a day.
Yes.
But these things need to be kept in mind.
Yeah.
And when the welfare you were talking about, even in the domestic world, right? It's the same thing. I mean, it's animals everywhere. Even for a dog, I mean, you could do the best orthopedic surgery to fix his leg, but if the cage is not cleaned and that animal is stressed, do you recover or heal well if you are under stress? No, you don't.
No, you don't.
But I think we lack standards of animal care, whether it's wildlife or domestic. And I mean, I come from a world where initially we began with domestics.
Yes.
And I've done it actively for 12 to 13 years, where we were dealing with mass quantities of animals, like
Yeah.
minimum 1,000 to 1,200 admissions
Yeah.
every month.
Wow.
So I do know what that is like, you know, in that sense. So I feel like we don't have any standards to follow. There are no minimum care guidelines or rules that are applicable to all. Animal NGOs on the domestic sides are not regulated at all.
Yes, that's what's really.
So unless somebody flags a problem
Yeah.
or says that there's cruelty happening, which again the
Gets
interpretation,
diluted. Yeah, it gets
interpretation
diluted
of
a
which
lot.
is very, very subjective.
Yeah.
What is considered cruelty and what is not? It's such
I
grey
think there's a
area.
very thin line between welfare and cruelty from my
Most certainly.
observation.
Most
You know, there's
certainly.
a really thin line there.
So I think most people begin with welfare in mind,
Yes.
and they don't realize when they tip over.
It goes into negligence, right?
Negligence, even classic cases of animal hoarding.
Yes, I wanted to talk about that as well.
So I assure you, most people who are firstly, our country doesn't recognize animal hoarding as an issue. In other parts of the world, at least it is recognized.
Yeah.
But in India, it is not recognized. In fact, it's looked at as a very altruistic act when somebody
Yeah.
taking and caring for 100, 200, 500 animals, which is fine if you have the staff to do it, if you genuinely have the human to animal ratio to look after 500,000 animals by all means.
Yeah.
But the kind of cases we've seen where you
Yeah.
have 1 or 2 people who are
With
doing
hundreds
this,
of animals.
or with 50 cats, or with
Yeah.
100 dogs,
Yeah, it's
and then you
And
know
two
those
staff members to help feed
and
those
to
100.
feed those animals.
Yeah.
I think just the general concept that just feeding an animal is not enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah. So its welfare is way beyond that.
Yes.
And I think, like I said, there are no minimum care guidelines. There's no check and balance. There's no regulation on
Yeah.
it, which is why it easily slips into cruelty.
Yes.
Because you see, when you begin from the act of rescuing an animal or showing compassion towards an
Yeah.
animal, the reality is, okay, you help that animal for that moment, but it makes a human feel good.
Exactly.
And then you want more and more of that good
feel
feeling.
good, yeah.
And then you do more. And then you don't realize when you've tipped over that point where you're actually doing cruelty to the animals.
Exactly,
But
you know.
it takes, you know, you sound like a horrible person when you say that, but that is the reality. I mean, after seeing it for so many years, I can tell when a situation there's just genuine welfare, or this is just feeding someone else's ego, and the
Yeah.
animals are truly not happy.
Yeah, I mean, instantly when you walk in, like I can talk about my experience. I don't know if you remember, I told you that camp with 2,600.
Yes.
So we sterilized, vaccinated, and microchipped 2,600 dogs in 8 weeks. And for me, the vet standard had to be at par with the humane handling. We did not use one catch pole on any of the animals.
Okay.
The kennels were constantly being kept clean. There was calming music playing for the dogs. We had 4 reactive dogs
Okay.
out of 2,600, meaning they were vocal.
Right.
For me, that was the win. Not the number of surgeries done, because they were handled humanely. We just had 17 boys in there who were cleaning, feeding, and interacting with the dogs.
Great.
That's what they were there for.
So-
apart from the catching team and apart from the veterinary team, that's what they were doing.
Right. So I remember, in fact, I'll never forget this. I remember visiting the Dogs Trust in, I think, 2017 or 18, I'm not sure. And they said one telltale sign of, a good shelter or any space where a large number of dogs are kept is that the only noise you will hear is when it's possibly feeding time
Yeah.
or treatment time. Okay. I remember coming back with this, and I remember smiling about it as well, because it's again something that used to bother me. We used to have anywhere between 250 to 350 dogs at any given time.
Yeah.
And we were not running a shelter. It was literally a rescue center, so only the hurt and injured. So
Yeah.
imagine you have animals in pain.
Yeah.
Right? And even then, we managed to keep them calm.
Yeah.
So there were times where people would come and say, "You seriously have 300 dogs
Yeah.
in here?" Because we can't hear
Yeah,
them.
Yeah, it's
You know?
amazing. And you have that one howler. There's
Yeah,
always
you'll
that
always
one,
have one howler.
There's that one howler.
Yeah,
that you
who
have.
starts everything.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. But basically, so for example, this is, but a lot of those principles are valid for any other animal itself. I mean, even for humans, do you really want to be in somebody's face all the time? It's
Yeah.
very common. If you're not feeling well, I mean, you're admitted somewhere. the dogs should not be looking at each other
Yeah.
constantly,
Yeah.
not too many housed at the same time. So, it's, they say sometimes common sense is a bit uncommon,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, there are no guidelines.
But
and
like the
standards.
constant when I bring this up, right, with people, it's like we don't have funds. We don't have manpower. Then my response usually to that is then handle as many as you can with the manpower. But what will happen to the rest? And I'm like that. I mean, that's where I go back into. There's a very thin line between welfare and negligence and cruelty.
I'll tell you this: the number of calls we would get, people would think we're horrible to say no. This is one thing I've learned very early on in running an organization. Learn to say no.
Yes.
You should know when to say no. When I would rather have 100 or 250 who I have the resources for and do a damn good job of it,
Yeah.
versus take on 251 and then do a terrible job
for
for all
all.
of them.
Yes.
Right? I think that this is where this part of this is not your hobby. If you're doing this as a hobby,
Yeah.
then it's different. But if you are running a setup
yeah.
where you are providing proper care to an animal, it's like a human hospital. If you have 250 beds, can you take in patient 251? No, you cannot. Right? So the thing is, what will happen, you also have to realize that you can't help all.
Yes.
But what you do take on, you do a good job of it. And I think we all need to start drawing these lines for the sake of the animal.
Animals, yeah, because the reason why you got into this,
Yes.
because it is constant that, oh, they're not sending out their catching vehicles, oh, they're not doing, there's this, I keep hearing this, right?
I get where you're coming from, because again, I've dealt with it for so many years. I feel that if there were minimum care guidelines, a lot of this would get ironed out.
Why aren't they there? Isn't AWBI supposed to put them in?
Correct. But you see what would happen there. This is a complex answer again, simply because if these guidelines were to come in place, a lot of places would get shut down. And then what would happen to those animals? Big question mark. We're already dealing with a mammoth-sized problem. So I think it's it's like one of those chicken and egg scenarios, who came first kind of thing, and what will be the ripple effect of something. So I think this has to come in slowly, and there has to be like policy change when it comes to how animal welfare organizations are run. So for example, captive wildlife facilities where wildlife is kept, there are plenty of regulations for it. They are being followed. At least there are regulatory bodies. At least there are regulations. But for the domestic world, there are not. So I think that's the first change that needs to come in. Then the ones who can conform to those rules will at least be on the right side of the law.
Yeah.
So I think all of this will come with that. I think because this is a sector that begins more from emotions and, that, I think little, practicality goes flying out of the window.
Yeah.
And it takes, it really takes a certain kind of space in your head to say, I want to be professional about this and I want to do this right day on day. I can't keep changing my rules every day.
Correct.
Or
I also feel they go on the extreme, because then some of them just go very practical. Right? And they've forgotten the animal. And they've forgotten the compassion.
So there's a balance.
I feel some are...
So I always, this has been one of my quotes always. See, you have to be very passionate to do this work.
Yes.
But you have to be practical in equal measure. It has to be 1:1. Okay? Yeah. Because if you're only passionate, you will burn out.
Yes.
If you're only practical, then it will not end up being great for the animals. The welfare aspect might get lost. So I think it has to be passion and practicality, professionalism in equal measure.
Yeah.
And that's how you can sustain doing this for many years.
Compassion, animal, name.
Correct.
And I believe wildlife, you don't name your animals.
No,
domestics,
so in domestics we do.
Yeah.
We, in fact, it's hilarious, but when we were working only with domestic animals, even if we had 300, every single one had a name.
It's amazing.
Like,
I love
literally,
that.
we had these 2 cows and everyone was so exhausted because they came at 2 in the morning and we had a really, really long day.
Yeah.
And still, imagine our creativity had died. And for the rest of their lives, they were called Andarwala and Baharwala because the Andarwala was being treated and Baharwala was being treated outside. So, but they had names.
Names are so important, right? For the domestic.
Because that is the concept of a domestic animal. It is supposed to be with humans.
Yeah.
And exactly opposite to that is wildlife,
yes.
where you do not attach these names to them.
Yes.
You don't do that simply because it then attaches human emotion to it.
Yeah.
And in fact, that is something that hinders its freedom.
Yes.
Why do we want ownership over everything as humans, right? They're
Yeah.
wild animals. They do not have a name.
Yeah.
They have a species,
Yes.
let's refer to them as that. So interestingly, whenever you do visit the rescue center,
I am coming soon, yeah.
you will see we have 8 leopards who are not slated to go back to the wild
They're
for
staying
certain
with you.
reasons. The department will eventually place them in lifetime care facilities, but they've been with us for a while, and I don't know when they will go, but for now they're with us. But I know they're not going back to the wild. They do have names, but they're internal reference names for us. We do not call them John or
no.
Usain Bolt or,
Tommy.
and those are their internal names.
Yeah.
But for any other wild animal that comes in,
You guys
even
don't
if
name
it's
them, I know.
we will not name them.
I know. It's
and
amazing.
even the names for internal reference that we have, we do not put them out anywhere, because you see, I think
Just for you guys talking to each other.
yeah, it's just for reference, because
Yeah.
they're there every day. Because you see, what that does is we have to be really careful about what we put out.
Yeah.
Because we do believe that people will get influenced by that and then
Yes.
start naming animals, and
Yeah.
that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't stop there, and then they start feeding them, and then they
Yeah.
start doing all
Yeah,
sorts of
all
other
that
things.
stuff. Yeah,
so
stuff.
the whole idea is to keep wildlife wild, and
Yeah.
which is why we'll just, for us, when they come in, they are a case to be treated. You will come and see, of course, each one is really looked after by different eyes, veterinary and
That's what I was gonna
non-veterinary.
ask. Amazing.
And so that is definitely, everyone has checks. We have data systems where everything is recorded daily. So there
Fabulous.
are, they're really looked after, but the minute we know they're ready for release, that is
Out.
gotta go.
So, Neha, as a citizen, can I sponsor a wild animal at rescue?
You can sponsor the care of, then there are some people who do it for a particular animal, in
Yeah,
the
like
sense,
a
like some people, a species.
Yes.
Like some people have this, there's somebody who had sponsored, part of the nursery.
Yeah.
Or the deer, and there
Or
are
a
some
leopard
who
or
are
a
the
hyena.
leopards.
I can-
Yes. So that can be.
You have that on your
Yes,
website?
we do have that on our website, where you can sponsor, a particular species of animals. Yes, you can definitely do
And,
that. And then we send updates to people about
Fabulous.
that as well,
And
to our donors.
can a citizen volunteer at rescue?
Yes, a citizen can volunteer at rescue.
Okay.
Some prefer to come to the center and
Yes.
help us out. There is a process where you have to come for an induction.
Yes.
And depending on what you want to do, so
Yeah.
in the induction, we sort of introduce people to the organization,
Yeah.
the do's, don'ts, what do volunteers do, what they can do, and based on their response after that. So at the end of the induction, there's a form that you fill, and we get to gauge what your skills are, how you can help the organization.
Best.
Because you see, people want to help, but they're not sure how to.
Yes.
And sometimes even after coming, and then they realize, okay, this is real work.
Yeah, and
right?
it's a lot. Yeah.
And it's a lot. So I think we have some incredible volunteers, and but everyone thinks that because they see maybe a social media video or something like that,
They think they're
this is
going
all
out on
fun
a
and games.
rescue. Yeah.
So it doesn't
It's
work
not
that
all fun and games. I don't think that
So yeah,
is-
volunteers will probably begin with enclosure cleaning,
Yes,
helping
which is
out in the kitchen.
like hospitality.
Yes.
You
so
start,
you start
with
absolute
the
at
jhadu
the-
puja, safai.
Huh. But we all began that way.
Everybody
it's
does
not
it.
like
I love
anyone's-
it. I love that
So it's
part.
not like you're getting some bad treatment or anything like that. We've
But you
all
will
done
start
it.
with that.
That's you have to start ground up.
Yeah.
And then we see the volunteers' commitment as well, that they are coming regularly. And
Yeah.
with wildlife, you need dependable, volunteers.
You have you said 230 species now, right? That you guys have
So,
helped
I mean,
over a period of
Yeah,
time.
at any given time, we have about 400 wildlife under rehab at the center.
You have species-wise vets?
No, so we have 8 full-time veterinarians working at rescue. Each one of them has different specialties in terms of some are great at orthopedic surgeries,
Okay.
some are really good at soft tissue surgeries, some are really good in medicine. About 4 of them are very experienced in chemical immobilization, which is darting.
Yes.
So they have, and there are some who are really good with reptiles. There are some who are, who are good with all kinds of species.
Yeah.
So because our vets have had to go through over 230 species, they've
also
gained a lot of experience.
Yeah.
So I would say none of our vets are such that you put them in a situation and they won't know what to do with that animal. But they do have their specialties, and yes, they're full-time working for this, and believe me, there's no rest because there's cases coming in morning and night.
Where do you train your, can I call them animal handlers, or what do you call them? Animal
Rehabilitators.
rehabilitators.
So-
like there's a special training course for.
No
you guys
such
just
course.
learned on the fly.
No, they don't. See, we learned on the fly. We also learned observing what a lot of organizations across the world are doing, because it's definitely more developed in other parts of the world. Visited so many organizations
teams
myself.
go?
Not now. Not so. Our current teams are all trained by us.
Okay.
So now over the years we've developed our own program. So
Nice.
earlier when we would hire someone, there are certain qualities we look for.
Yeah.
Right. So certain skills and a certain attitude in a person, and we
Yes.
know if they're going to learn.
Because I had this chat with a bunch of welfare people saying, when you hire your animal handlers, do you ask them if they like animals? That would be my first question. My second question would be, do you have an animal or have had an animal? Right? I said, who is asking the questions? And a lot of them I asked, what are the questions you ask? And I didn't get that answer. And I said, are we just looking at salary packages of what the boys are going to come on with, or if they genuinely like working? Because at least in that, I've been conducting workshops with in collab with people with the animal handlers shelters, and I was like, there's the thought process of ye kutte ka kaam hai.
Correct.
And वो नीचे आए से बड़ा नेक काम है भाई. Like, I'm saying take it back up, because you are doing something for the voiceless, right? So don't think you're there.
So
That
I
thought
think
process.
this all boils down to being professional.
Yes.
And while we say professional, whereas you're talking about asking people whether they like animals, and I am talking about being professional. So where do these two meet?
Yes.
Right? So I'll tell you where this meets. If I'm professional, I will have the right list of questions to ask my staff,
Yes.
right? So to make sure. Now, I may be very compassionate, I may ask those questions, but all the other people in the organization, when they are hiring, are they asking the right questions?
Exactly.
So, have I put those systems in place?
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're hiring a vet, I have a whole list of questions that veterinarians should be asked. If we're hiring a wildlife rehabilitator, we have a whole list of questions they need to be asked.
Yeah.
In the domestic world, you definitely ask, do you like animals?
Yeah.
Right? You see, I do not think that should be compromised on. You'd
I
rather
agree.
do less than compromise on that.
Agree. Yeah.
In fact, when it comes to the wildlife side and a rehabilitator, we look at people who have any kind of naturalistic intelligence. We ask them what kind of stuff they did as children, right? So
Nice.
most kids who have that naturalistic sense or intelligence, the ones who play with the rocks, the ones who bring leaves home, they're the ones who will connect with wildlife. They're the
Yes.
ones who are likely to do that. So sometimes you may be like, why are they asking me this weird question?
Yeah.
In this interview,
it
but that's
connects.
where it
It-
connects
it
from.
connects. Yeah,
You
yeah.
ask them, what would happen if an animal you're looking after, it's an orphan and it needs feeding every 2 hours. Are you willing to come back in the night to look after it? Because it only recognizes you in that stage. Because we don't change the rehabilitators for an orphan.
Fantastic.
So
Yeah.
it's not like somebody's on a night shift and a day shift. So these are questions we ask at the outset. If you go into the orphan nursery, and that, because for the first 3 weeks it's very important. After that it's fine for them to
Yeah.
be on their own and we make sure in fact they have no human interaction after that.
Yeah.
But that period is very critical. Otherwise, the stress of being alone or hands changing stresses the animal out. So we have to ask rehabilitators, are you willing to come in the night and stay up till 12 and 2 in the morning to feed this animal?
Yeah.
And if they're willing to go that extra mile, then
You
their
know
heart's
they're-
in the right place.
Yeah.
So maybe they haven't handled a wild animal before.
But the heart's
But
in the
are
right-
they willing to do it? Yeah, I will come. Anytime if the animal needs, if you need me, I will be there. Then you understand. So
Yeah.
I think it's about asking the right questions. It's about the fact that am I conducting a proper interview?
Yes.
Am I getting most NGOs don't even have agreements they make their employees sign.
Yeah.
I'm not saying make everyone sign a waiver or something like that, but do they understand that this is, a place where I am answerable for these animals?
Yes.
So I think professionalism is something that needs to kick in.
Yes.
At the cost of being professional, you need to make sure you're asking the right questions, which helps you recognize
Yeah.
who are the right employees, and then are the right actions being driven while at work. So I think
Yeah.
it's about that.
I know, it's just so much, right? But it's amazing. Like, it's
Yeah.
so important. I genuinely feel that because there are times when I walk in and I'm like, why are these people handling animals? Like I even feel that way as someone
Yes.
from the outside, and that's where I sense there's a lot of that hopelessness that comes in for animal welfare. Just my personal observations is like, if our welfares are not treating the animals right, how are you expecting a citizen that's looking at you, how you're catching them? I'm dead against catch poles. I'm just going to say it out there, right? Nets, humane techniques. I believe catch poles are for wildlife.
Yes.
Primarily, and not for flinging dogs into vehicles and flinging them out of vehicles.
I see dog catchers use catch poles when they're scared and they don't know how to catch,
They
and they've
haven't
not
been
been trained.
taught. Yeah.
Okay, so the humane acceptable way, which is even mentioned in the law, is butterfly nets.
Which is still stressful for the animal.
Which is still stressful,
Yeah.
but you see you have so many free-ranging dogs in different geographies.
Yeah.
That to capture them, if you have to, pick the best out of the worst, then yes, using a Balinese or which is a little bigger net
Yeah.
as compared to the butterfly.
Okay.
Is the drop nets.
It's called a drop net.
The Balinese net.
Balinese net.
Same, very similar. in
Similar to
concept.
that butterfly net. Yeah.
So that is a good way. After we started doing a lot of wildlife rescue, we just use trap cages. So
Yeah.
we just even if we have, I
Yeah.
think it's actually a humane thing to do, to leave a trap, leave
Yeah,
some food and catch the dog.
Yeah, they catch them like that as well,
Yeah, so trap cages is always a more
Yeah.
humane way to do it.
And then just lift. But then again, it's about having that much manpower to pick up that dog in that cage, put it in the vehicle. So I keep hearing all of this.
Yeah.
This is what I hear for why certain things are being used. And again, it comes back, like you need more people.
Correct.
You need to do lesser numbers, or I don't know. We got to figure
The
this.
size of the problem we are dealing with right now, and why I'm calling this a problem is surely because of the size of the problem.
Yes.
That's why it's a problem.
Yes.
For example, if Pune city had 10,000 dogs on the street, or even 20 or 30 or 40,000,
Yeah.
it would be perfectly fine. There would even that resistance that is there from the community
Yeah.
would not be there.
But because of the magnitude.
But because you're dealing with lakhs.
Yeah.
Is when it is problematic. And when you have to then try a solution, you are running out of time, you have targets to meet, and that's when all the problems come in. So I think this balancing solutions, welfare, there have to be more players who are even doing this, but doing it with the same standards.
Yeah.
It's a complex
mix of stuff.
Yeah, mix of stuff that
But
has
I feel
to be
like
dealt with.
I also feel that because people have been doing it for so long, compassion fatigue or misguided compassion, I don't know which one it goes into, kicks in, and things like this will kind of maybe get them to start thinking again and relook at stuff. I'm hoping even for donors, I tell donors, don't just give money.
Right.
Ask what you're giving the money for. Maybe consider sponsoring capacity building, training of the employees.
Correct.
These are very important things beyond just खाने के लिए पैसे दे दो.
Correct.
It's everything is khana.
Yeah.
I just feel there are this big khana khilao.
What we view as welfare, like you said, are people looking at exactly what's happening? Similarly, many people think it's just a kind, compassionate act to feed, wildlife or domestic animals. But it's not always good. It can be really harmful as well.
Yeah.
So I think when you talk about donor and donor culture, I think it's just basic due diligence, right?
Yeah.
I think even if they feel they did their due diligence, are you asking the right questions?
That's the most important.
That is the most important. Everybody
question.
asks questions.
Yeah,
But
the
are you
right-
asking the right questions? Now, how is everyone to know what are the right questions? Right? So I don't blame the influencer to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Because how does he know? He might think that, oh, the registered NGO nearby, oh, they are doing all right. I don't need to call them. Let me help this person who has no help. For them, it's an act of compassion that they
Yeah.
are doing. They're coming from that.
Yeah.
But I think that it's people like us. Now, there have been times where even I have reached out to a person, like not somebody I don't know at all,
Yeah.
but somebody I may know, and I say, hey, did you, ask these questions? They're like, I did not look at it like this.
Yes, they don't.
So
you're not thinking
they just
about it.
don't know better, and
Yeah.
I think that is the point of this.
Yes.
That of even having this conversation today, and
Yeah.
hope that people reach out, even if they don't, and the decision is eventually theirs.
Yes.
But if you want to know what are the right questions to ask, what are the right questions to ask, whether it's an NGO or anybody.
Yeah.
I say this to a lot of people. I said, ask me the same. I always prepare in a way. I said
Yeah.
the same questions that I would like people to ask me. Maybe you should be asking these questions to any organization you
Yes.
donate to, whether it's human, whether it's animal.
Correct.
If you are giving, make sure that beyond compassion, you're
Yes.
also solving a problem.
Yes. Correct.
A problem that needs to be addressed, because that is how the world is going to evolve. That's how change will happen.
Yeah, because like,
Otherwise, you're just feeding into the problem.
exactly, and that was because when I started raising funds for my camp, right, and everyone is like, but nothing has changed. We've been donating for so many years. Suffering is only going up. Conflict is only going up.
Correct.
And I'm like, this is gonna be, and they're like, okay, you're in the middle of this equation, so happy. But most of that donation came because I was in the middle person in there, right? There's that trust factor for whatever reason. But the overall perception I got from most of my donors
Yes.
is that
What changed?
we don't know whether the money is going to reach the animals or get eaten up on the way. That is
True.
That is. I mean, I'm
So
telling you from
this
my
is- this
first
is- this is-
hands-on experience.
Of course. So you see, because maybe you were in the middle,
Yeah.
right? People gave it in good faith as
Yes.
well, that you'll make sure
That it's
it
the
goes to the
animals.
animal.
Yes.
Right? But
Yes,
this can't
correct.
always be the case.
Exactly.
Right? That's number one. So now that's got to do with every donor doing their due diligence and asking. Like, for example, an organization like ours, we have, for every process that we have
Yeah.
key performance indicators, KPIs, that any other organized professional organization will have.
Yeah.
The corporates who donate to us have trackers they've put in place.
Nice.
You to give these numbers out, and we take that very seriously.
Yeah.
With giving proper evidence right from the start. Okay, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Right. One is donors at the end of the day asking the questions. That does the ultimate beneficiary of this, what does he eventually need?
Yeah.
And the people who are handling this,
Yes.
what are the things they need to make the animal or human the ultimate beneficiary?
Yes.
Number one, doing their due diligence. So I think that seeing it through, even till today, if we rescue a large animal like an abandoned horse or something like that,
Yeah.
it was abandoned. We can't treat it and put it back on the street.
Exactly.
We do have a sanctuary where we will look after that animal till the end of its life. We are not going to dunk it back on the streets. It didn't belong there to begin with, right? So I feel like after a point you start questioning your actions and saying, am I seeing this through?
Yeah.
And I am answerable for that
Animal.
support that the donors are giving me. What is the point if I am going to contribute back to the world's problems?
Exactly. Put them back.
Yeah.
Return, put back.
So
It's
I
just-
genuinely feel that, there is a very different concept of community animals. Like if you go to Greece, for example, every restaurant you will see a
Yeah,
dog,
yeah.
outside. And
Yeah.
this is our dog.
Yeah.
But it's a very different sense. But I think sometimes, I think because in the recent times you've interacted with so many organizations and all of that, it's very easy to also, unfortunately, to get very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
By this.
I'm balancing. I remember my chat with you, Neha.
Yeah.
When I initially started, I spoke to her, like I got a number straight, rescuing that baby monkey
Yes,
who didn't
I
make it,
remember.
Vayu. And I remember a couple of chats.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking for 3 years and you kept telling me, saying, Shivani, the first thing you need to do is get yourself a team. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not opening a foundation. I'm just doing this as a citizen. And I'm still there. I'm still doing
Yeah.
this as a citizen. But I have always kept those words of yours in my head.
Yeah.
Like do it to a certain level when you feel it's too much for one person to.
Yeah, to process.
Yes.
So I feel like you need to, and because then you stop seeing things clearly.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think I had to take those few moments where I was like, okay, what am I doing? who am I answerable to?
Yes.
For me, I am answerable to the animals. Every
Same.
animals that comes to my organization.
Yeah.
I am answerable to the donor who put faith in me,
Yeah.
who supported us,
Yeah.
right? So am I doing right by the support they are giving us? Is it truly eventually helping the animal?
Yeah.
Right? So I think asking those questions is important. And then when you get surrounded by hearing so many things that are going wrong in the field,
Yeah.
you have to say, okay, let me focus on what I am
Blinders
doing. You
and-
have to put blinders
Yeah,
on.
I do
So I
that.
think that's really important to do.
That I've taken your advice. You know, Neha, I want to talk a little bit about my personal experiences with a lot of stuff. Like, say, for example, like, when we used to go to Thailand for holidays, I have taken.
You have a picture with a tiger?
I have a picture with a cub giving it milk. I have watched those animal shows. I have been to SeaWorld in America, and I was one of the kids that was actually called into the enclosure to kiss Shamu. I don't think we knew any better that this is cruelty and this is wrong, and we're paying. I mean, I did realize as a child with the Delhi Zoo. Because it was right next to my house. I would go there, and as I grew older, from that fascination of, oh wow, that's an elephant, that's a white tiger. I think Delhi Zoo had a white tiger also
Yes.
when I was growing up. And then I started looking, I don't know if I could see more. The enclosures were filthy. The animals looked sickly. The wounds had flies on them. And I actually walked into that office. I must have been under 15. I walked into the Delhi Zoo office and I said, I want to help.
Right.
And I was just told to get out. Literally, like, who are you? And I was like, what can I do? Do you have a young zoo club? Do you have something? Can I come and clean the enclosures? I was told to
See, I think
please out of here.
See, the first thing you spoke about, of course, it actually is the tourism industry. Okay, this is not about animals. Animals are merely the props in it. Okay, so whether you're talking about Thailand, I mean, in today's times, now you will read a lot more
Yes.
about what happens behind the scenes.
Yes.
How did that tiger cub land up there?
Yeah.
It is not that the tigresses there are giving cubs, and even if they are, they should be fed by the mothers.
Yes.
So which obviously means that those cubs are orphaned. How did those cubs become orphaned, right? Now, there are very few people who ask these questions.
Yes.
You see, we live in a world where social media likes. I went to Thailand, I fed a tiger or took a picture with a leopard. I know so many people. We all know people who have been there, done that. And I think it is possibly one of our roles to educate people
Yes.
better. It is only because people don't know better how that animal landed there.
Yeah.
Everyone gets fed these humbug stories about how that animal ended up there.
Which is not
You know,
true.
there are polar bears, there were polar bears in zoos. Why is it needed?
Yeah.
Especially in today's times when you can go on the internet
Yes.
and watch videos about polar bears in their natural habitat.
Yes.
Right? So a lot has changed from 20 years ago to now, where we do have that ability to get our children exposed to
Yeah.
these animals through the internet.
Yes.
There are incredible organizations, reserves that even have live cams streaming,
Yes.
animals. So if one had to look, there are tons of ways to expose children. The concept of a zoo just for tourism or display is truly a redundant concept in today's date. Coming to the zoo experience that you had, in India, we do have a central zoo authority that does have very stringent guidelines for how animals in permanent captivity or lifetime captivity, or which are either in captivity or for zoo display, should be housed and cared for.
Yes.
Like I mentioned before, this whole concept of wildlife care, wildlife protection is still a
1972.
relatively, it's still a relatively new concept.
Yes.
There are the standards, guidelines. These are things which keep evolving with time as well, and we need to keep updating ourselves. So maybe we do have some guidelines, but they need to be massively upgraded, updated.
Yeah.
And I think that's what lacks. I also think the number of professionals available in this sector.
Yeah.
For example, I recently just now told you about how we train our wildlife rehabilitators.
Yes.
There is no job post called wildlife rehabilitator. It's just a veterinarian or an animal keeper.
Yes.
Now, who is this animal keeper? Is this keeper the one who's cleaning the facility,
Correct.
cleaning the cages, or does this person understand natural history, behaviors of this animal? Has this person been trained for that?
Yeah.
Those are, there is no course that in our country especially, which teaches you this or certifies people to do this.
Yes.
Right? Organizations like us have been sort of upgrading our own skills, knowledge by liaising with other
Others.
organizations across the globe and trying to upgrade our standards.
Yeah.
But this is not available for everyone.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you are probably one of those people who went into the zoo office and said, I want to help,
Yeah.
but there are also a whole load of people who would just take a picture and put it on the social media and become keyboard activists.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
I've seen a
really
lot.
easy to do that.
Yeah, and
Right?
that doesn't go
Without
anywhere.
even understanding what this is driven by.
Yeah.
So sometimes there are certain reasons why it happens. Now, if you look at our climatic conditions, sometimes what we see, sometimes there are explanations behind it, sometimes there is neglect.
Yeah.
But also the answers that are given to people, right? Most people are dismissed off without giving
I've been
any
dismissed.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, we as an organization, of course, we are more like a hospital. We are not a zoo by
Yes.
any means.
Yeah.
Because animals that come to us are not on display. In fact, half the time, if you come to our enclosures, you'll be like, where is the animal? Because we've created enough hides for them.
Yeah.
So they'll be hiding because that's one way to reduce their stress. They don't
yeah.
like seeing humans.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's about, especially the things that you said, about having done that. I think if you knew back then that this was harming an animal or an animal was pulled out of its natural habitat so that somebody else could gain commercially at their cost, you would not indulge in it, right? But I think this awareness needs to come, and I hope at least somebody who watches this video is deterred from doing that in the future. And I think the more we talk about this openly, the better it is.
Yeah.
And it's very similar. It's about that experience can take you down one of two paths. It can take you down a path of reflection as to where did this animal come from.
Yes.
Alternatively, it can feed into fascination,
Yeah.
where then people want these wild animals as pets.
Yeah.
Because you know why? I sat next to a leopard and I petted it and I have a picture. Now I want that.
Yeah,
Or
that's a scary thing.
I fed an orangutan, or I had a boa around or a snake around my neck, and then that's what this next generation wants to do, and which is why the pet trade, all the trafficking, has just been on the rise, and it is horrific, and it's very much here. I mean, not spoken about so much.
We need to talk about it. I mean, as a kid, I had 2 terrapins. I bought it from a pet shop.
Correct.
Can I just go to a pet shop and buy these exotic animals? Don't they need like licenses? Is it legal? I mean, I can just go get something.
So till 2023, okay, if a species was not a protected Indian species, but it was not in our Wildlife Protection Act,
you could buy it.
You could buy it. So maybe the terrapins you bought were maybe red-eared sliders, or I don't know what they were, which is the most commonly sold turtle in pet shops.
Yeah, this I know about 30 years ago.
Yeah, but it still happens, and it's a globally invasive species. So what happens is people buy it and then they abandon it into all our natural bodies, and in fact it becomes invasive and almost ends up taking over our Indian wildlife, wiping them out. And this is a very common thing.
A little turtle.
Yeah, and they become really big once they go. So, and they're very hardy. So, I mean, very recently we had an incident where, there was this pond where we had to, it was near a temple. And, the temple authorities themselves said, that there are some turtles that we are finding continuously dead. So, when we went in there, in that pond, we actually removed exactly 99 turtles. And about 55 were exotic, non-native, which means they were not born there. They came, somebody had abandoned them, not all of them, but one by one. And the Indian species which were there inside were all injured, battered. So
the exotic ones were attacking.
Yes, and they were competing for food. So it was a really bad scene. Basically, coming back to the pet trade, till 2023, you could essentially, go and buy from a pet shop any species that was not protected under the Indian the laws. in 2023, we've had an amendment where now we are also considering the animals that are listed in the CITES.
Okay.
Which basically there is, from a layperson's perspective, there are wildlife species which are protected under this convention.
Okay.
And they cannot be traded freely. So if today somebody had to go and get a wildlife species which was listed in that, right, which is non-native to India, you would have to, so your pet shop guy needs to basically provide you the source of this.
Paperwork.
Did he have the import license for this? Where did he bring the animal from?
So you should ask as a citizen if you're going to
As
buy
a citizen, you need to ask for its papers.
papers.
Of its import license of where this animal came from, so that you can legally hold it. In fact, if you go buy something and the authorities crack down on you, you will be liable.
And you're going to jail.
And you're going to get in trouble, right? So, and unfortunately, unlike domestic laws, fortunately, wildlife protection laws are way stronger as compared to, the domestic,
animals.
sadly. But in fact, what's really sad is a lot of people go to pet shops and there are Indian species as well, because they can't tell the difference between these turtles, right? So right now you're saying terrapin, but which terrapin was it? There are terrapins which are Indian species. Let's hope you didn't get one of them. And, but, it's important to know what species are you buying? Where is this Indian or
There's just one Chotu turtle. There are multiple species in there.
Correct. So, as a responsible pet owner, you need to ask the pet shop person, which species is this? Where did this come from? Right? So, do you have its paperwork? Is it declared? So, those are important questions to ask. The minute you start asking these questions is when they will also clean up their act, because they will start realizing that now public is asking for this. We better get our act in order. The implementation of these laws will take some time to regulate whatever exotic wildlife is already there.
Yeah.
But the reality is that this trade is rocketing. It's a newfound obsession, that people have to have these wild pets.
Yeah, I read the wildlife trade. I was reading it recent, between 7 and 23 billion, which is declared.
Yeah, that is known figures. But it's way bigger, possibly way bigger. And it is not something we discuss that is happening somewhere else. It's very much happening here. A lot of seizures have been happening even very much in India.
Yeah.
In different parts of the country where mass volumes of animals are coming in through baggages, suitcases.
In suitcases.
And it's really horrible. In fact, there have been times where the customs has opened up suitcases and found dead animals in it.
Yeah.
There was
suffocated,
that suffocated. And boxes and boxes of, turtles and tortoises stuffed in. And it's really horrid. And and why are they coming in? Why is somebody taking the risk of doing this?
Because there's a demand.
Because there is a demand. And demand basically breeds the supply. And there is such a high demand for this that people are willing to do this.
Yeah.
So
take
I
these
think,
risks
yes. And then, the sad part is, because even if you crack down on these cases, it is not that they go back to their country of origin. Because often one doesn't even know where they've really come from. You can say which country they've come from, but where over there, and all of that is a really big question mark. And then these animals end up in lifetime captivity. And I assure you, we do not have enough facilities to manage this load, So it's really sad. The outcome is just really poor for these animals.
It's very sad, because I remember when we talked about Vayu, and I was like, they were like, he will go to the zoo in Goa, to the Bondla Zoo. Right. And that's when I reached out to you, and I was like, why is he going to a zoo? He needs to be rehabilitated and released. And that's when so I feel like we also need to help and support the forest departments in our states.
Yes.
Can citizens help the forest departments?
It depends which state you're in and what mechanisms are already existing. Yeah. So I can speak for Maharashtra, where, for example, we do till 2021, we did not really have an official concept of transit treatment centers. Yeah. But Maharashtra Forest Department, the government has taken it very seriously. They've they've recognized the fact that animals can be rehabilitated and sent back. So now the government has actually made incredible provisions for budgets to put up this infrastructure. And then, of course, there are organizations like ours that are helping run this, because what happens is this is 24 by 7 work, and it is not. So this is where I feel, NGOs really play an important role, because
support.
we can feed in that gap. And because we come from that background, and we want to be able to do this for animals, we're additionally driven.
Yes.
So I feel that is something, and it's incredible in Maharashtra that the forest department is doing this, where they are putting up infrastructure, and now we just need to close that gap. So it's and I think regular citizens here, especially if they approach organizations like us, definitely they can either help themselves, they can contribute towards it, because I assure you, I've been on both the sides. It's far easier to get help for domestic animals as compared to wildlife.
I feel the other way.
No, I disagree. I'll tell you why. I'll give you a very clear reason why. Simply because, you see, it is easy to relate to domestic animals.
Yes.
You've seen them.
Yes.
Either in your house, in your relative's house, in your friend's house. So you can relate to it. Whereas with wildlife, especially when you're looking at support, especially you look at urban cities, most people are so disconnected. My own dad, when I showed him a picture of a pangolin, he's like, "What is this? I thought it was only found in Africa." I said, "No, Daddy, it is very much all around here."
Yeah, exactly.
He said, "What are you saying?" And I said, "Yes." He's like, "Oh, I didn't know. I thought this was a very rare thing." And I said, well, it is hard, it is an elusive creature, but it's definitely present. So most people don't even know
what is around.
What is around. I mean, in cities, you'll see, you will see kites, you will see a couple of the urban wildlife.
Yeah.
But I mean, especially in if you look at the western side of India, whether you're talking Maharashtra, Goa, I mean, we have the Western Ghats, where, the biodiversity here is incredible. But then again, you look at a state like Maharashtra, where the percentage of forest area, protected forest area, is so little. The rest of it is all human-dominated landscape. And there is wildlife everywhere. And because our population is growing, because our needs are increasing. And that's fair, because, our needs are increasing. I understand how important economic development is for the state.
Yes.
But I think that when we talk about coexistence, it cannot be one benefit at the cost of another. So I think it's organizations like ours that help raise community awareness levels of people of how to coexist with wildlife, whether it's an owl that is nesting in your duct, or or suddenly you're hearing of leopards coming into the city, or in peri-urban areas, those kind of things. So I feel like that is, citizens can, number one, get more aware. And I think education is so important. And that is why even most people see us as an organization that does rescue and rehabilitation. Yes, that is the response side of our work. But 50% of our work is community education, whether it's urban, whether it's peri-urban or rural. Because there are animals everywhere.
Yes.
So we have teams that are just focused on education and awareness.
Fabulous.
And that's all that the teams do. Because that's how you protect animals. That's how you prevent them from coming into trouble in the first place. So
That's amazing. And like, if people are watching this, they want to do something for wildlife now, today, Neha. What can a citizen do to help wildlife in our country?
Yeah, so there are many things you can do. I think understanding more about, firstly, don't directly contribute it to yourself, right? So don't take touristy pictures, don't fall for that trap. That's one thing, because you're feeding into an industry that is thriving on animals being poached from the wild. That's number one. One of the important roles that zoos play, let me also put that out here, is captive breeding of certain species that are going extinct. So one of the roles of zoos is also to do that. It is not just for display. The display angle is what a layperson sees, but there are these other roles, as they function as some of them function.
Do they all run like that?
No, they don't all run like that. So it's important to find out, right?
You have to do your research.
You have to do your research, right? So that's number one. I think number two is not encouraging the trade yourself, where, for example, it's very easy to, somebody is fascinated with having a ivory bangle or something like that.
Consumer products.
Yeah, consumer products. Don't indulge. That one bangle or that one pendant, believe me, there are
Thousands
of animals.
All those mink coats and stuff.
Yeah.
The clothes.
So whether it's the
fashion.
clothes, I mean, find out where it is being sourced from. You don't have to go into depression about it.
Correct.
I'm just saying, if you have a better choice, pick
Make
the
it.
better choice.
Make the better
You know,
choice.
pick a choice that does not involve animals and cruelty. That's the second thing. I think the third thing is to understand and just ingrain into your brains that wildlife should be kept wild. If it was a wild animal, there is no need to domesticate it. It is called wild for a reason.
Yeah.
It should not be domesticated. Don't kid yourself by saying it was in a pet shop. I felt bad for it because it was in a tank.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you take that animal home and you think you're giving it a better life,
paid for it.
You paid for it is one thing, but now it's an empty tank that will be filled up with another animal.
Exactly. The demand.
Right?
demand.
So unless you're willing to sort of break that tank and make sure the guy never gets another one, which you should not do.
Yeah.
But because that's vandalism.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is don't indulge in it. Don't just go only by emotion and feel sorry for it.
Think about
you
what
know,
you're doing.
think about what you're feeding
Choices-
into.
And choices are impacting.
Right.
the
In
animals.
fact, every time you see that, go educate 10 people around that
Yes.
area. You know what? Don't buy this because it may be not native to India, but it is native somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
It has come out from somewhere. And if you think they're being bred in India for the pet trade, believe me, somewhere down the line, it did come from animals that were poached from the wild.
Yeah.
Also, have you seen these conditions where these animals are bred? They are horrible.
Yeah.
You have trains full of live cargo coming in with birds. People say, I went to a pet shop, I bought the bird died in 2 weeks. Why did it die? Because it came with infections, you just couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You know, because they're bred in horrible conditions. They are, they're
Kept
sold. And, you know, so the thing is, if it's a wild animal, let it be
wild.
wild. You can do that, even if you're not indulging it in yourself. You know, there
Educate
are
people.
mindful ways to educate people. Don't go on some,
Rant.
you know,
Yeah.
rant about how they're contributing to cruelty, but you know, let people understand where this comes from.
Compassionate awareness as well, right? It's not just
and I
about...
just feel like, you know, actions speak louder than words. So I think if you possibly help an organization that is doing this work, support and do that, and then talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about what you're supporting. And then people will wonder, okay, why did my friends support this organization? What
Yeah.
exactly did they do? Okay, what are they trying to do? So I think that leads into a lot of reflection, and I think that's more important. So
Yeah.
sometimes telling a person that this is a cruel thing to do, don't do it, is not as well
effective.
received
Yeah.
as you actually, doing something yourself and standing as an example.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to do. So support the right organizations, support animals, people who are doing the right thing to put them back into their natural habitat,
Yeah.
or look after them for life, right? In the right conditions,
Yes,
with
I think very
welfare involved. Don't contribute to the trade yourself. You know, be mindful about what you're buying, whether it is no matter what
Makeup
animal
or-
it is,
yeah.
and or any other product for that
Yeah.
matter. But if you are getting a pet home, please be mindful about that, and
Ask for the papers.
ask for papers,
Origins.
no matter what animal it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, be mindful about even consumer products. Make sure it's not contributing at least to the wildlife trade. you
Yeah.
know?
Wow, Neha, you have answered so many questions, and it's amazing to know this. And thank you for taking our time to be here, driving down from Pune to Mumbai. It's been amazing. And if you please support Rescue, you've heard Neha. Please go on their website, check them out. This is the Four Legs and Two Mics podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe to it. And thank you for being here today, Neha.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun with this
Yeah.
candid conversation.
Thanks
And
again.
I really hope that, people listen to this and get a little more aware.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to help, like Shivani's already mentioned, reach
Rescue.
out. Thank
Yeah.
you.
The idea behind Four Legs and Two Mics is to raise awareness, to bring experts in the animal welfare space on one platform, so we can just discuss stuff and know what more we can do to help these animals. See you on the next one.